the Leela of Ramayana in many ways. We'll start with this in the assessment of the Acharyas. Bharata is the perfect embodiment of Padasevanam. Padasevanam is the position of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. She's always serving the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Bharata is always serving at the lotus feet or the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Ram. That's his position, and he loves it. Little discussion about the giving of his name. It's a part of the culture of Vedic tradition that in Kshatriyas, name-giving ceremony is performed 11 days after the birth of the child. Now, Krishna's name-giving ceremony was performed 40 days. Within 40 days, but this case, it was 11 days after their birth. There we see the four boys. There's Ram. There's Lakshman and Shatrughna. They were brothers, twins. And Bharata. So Vashishta is pictured here, giving their names with others in the painting, some brahmanas behind him and some ladies on the other side. And he was given the name Bharata. Bharata has several meanings. He was bearing the burden, Bharata, bearing the burden of the kingdom of Ram during Ram's exile. And notice there's the two lotus feet again of Lord Ramachandra. He had to bear that burden in the absence of his beloved brother. We'll hear the Leela as we go forward. Bharata also bears the burden of repeatedly being misunderstood, of having evil intentions towards Ram particularly, due to his mother. Now, but here's Bharata, but it's not Bharata because, at least if this is Dasrath, when he returned back to the kingdom, Dasrath was already deceased. So that's probably Ram rather than Bharata. But his mother had wicked intentions. I mean, she thought they were good intentions, but they were wicked intentions. And he had to bear the burden of people considering him to be part of that wicked plan. Bharata had this character of carrying out instructions of Lord Ram, even in his absence, as his life and soul. There we see Bharata worshiping the shoes, thus the lotus feet of Lord Ramachandra for 14 years. Of course, this shows him nicely dressed, but he was in tree bark and forest attire. And the painting is meant to depict the place where he resided. He chose to not reside in the city. He chose to reside at a place outside the city, a very simple village-like place with a little cottage where he placed the shoes Now, whether the shoes were on the throne in the palace or whether the shoes were in the cottage where he was staying, there seems to be two different descriptions, but that's okay. He was very dedicated to the service of Lord Ramachandra. He was particularly fond both of Ram and Shatrughna. Now, Shatrughna was not his sibling. Kaikeyi had one son, and Bharata was that one son. But Lakshman and Shatrughna were brothers, and Lakshman had very, very close attachment, special from childhood attachment to Ram. And Bharata similarly with Shatrughna, very attached. And they were very attached to one another. Now, these are some very special paintings of the pastimes in their childhood. But as you likely know, the pastimes of Krishna's childhood, there's volumes and volumes about Krishna's childhood, and not so about the four brothers. The small number of verses we'll see as we go forward. The Balakanda is then passed on to Ayodhya Kanda. That's the second Kanda or canto. And the Ayodhya Kanda begins in the transition. Bharata is important for transitioning activities. Bharata, leaves with his dear brother, Shatrughna, to his maternal uncle's home or palace. The maternal uncle, Kaikeyi, had a brother, and her brother's name was Yudhajit, and there was a lot of affection between Yudhajit and all of the family, but especially, naturally, Bharata had affection for his uncle, his mother's brother. And he was able, this isn't a detail, but it's part of his character. He was very attached to Ram, obviously. He was very attached to Ram, but he left. He left because he had maturity to understand the very affectionate Yudhajit. Shatrughna should have the opportunity to experience his loving affection because he was a very affectionate person, not only to his nephew, but to Shatrughna. The reason for mentioning this is it's part of his personality. And it's important to recognize this part of his personality. He understood how to balance relationships. Because in life, there's relationships. And sometimes, it's multiple relationships. And how do you manage multiple relationships? In his case, he was foregoing his primary affection for Ram to favor Shatrughna having the opportunity to be with his uncle, because his uncle was very affectionate. And all the while, you'll hear as we go forward, but all the while, both brothers were always with Ram by remembering Ram, because they're both very attached to Ram. No, Shatrughna is yet another personality. He's even more in the background. He liked being in the background. That's Shatrughna. So that was the one major shift. When he left, that's when the events started to shift. That was while he was away and Shatrughna was away. Dasarath had this plan to install Ram. That was inspired by super soul within his heart to have the events of Ramayana unfold. But Kaikeyi or Mantra read it a different way. that Dasarath was doing some skullduggery, some bad things in the absence of Bharata, to stab him or to trick him or to abuse him. That's how she, Mantra, read it. But Dasarath had a different idea. Dasarath said, rather than waiting for these boys, who knows? Death could come at any time. I might die. I should formally and properly pass on the kingdom to the one who everybody accepts, the eldest son, Ram. Then there was another event which Bharata played a very significant role in a game-changing event. The game-changing event is, as you see from the painting, this is Sita, Ram, and Lakshman in the forest, and they're in Panchavati, and Lakshman says to Ram something about Bharata, and he's remembering Bharata. He's remembering how soft he was and how Ram treated him like a father treats a son, and how Dasarath treated all of them, and he's used to comfortable life. And so Dasarath and Ram are caring for him, but now what's he doing? He's doing like we're doing. He's living a very austere life, taking cold baths in the Sarayu River, sleeping on the bare earth, foregoing palatable foods. He's living like an ascetic. Thoughts are drawn, this is 13 or 12 and a half, 13 years after their exile began, and he's thinking about Bharata. Now, he had some other thoughts about, we'll see, some other thoughts about Bharata, but they're brothers and transcendental brothers and deep affection for one another. So this is just describing his character, his personality. According to the Acharyas, indirectly, Lakshman is urging Ram to expedite killing of demons, because his purpose in being in the forest is the command of Dasarath, or the wish of Dasarath, or the wish of Kaikeyi. But this is a transcendental, subtle point. We were discussing about subtle points yesterday. He doesn't say, go kill the demons, because up to this point, he hasn't. I mean, almost none. But the main activity for 12 and a half plus years is visiting the sages' hermitages and fulfilling their desires. Their desire was they're meditating on and offering worship to the personality of Godhead. They're elevated Vaishnavas. And they wish to see the Supreme Lord, so he comes, because that's what the Lord does. Especially when he's performing his Leela, he comes. So that part was done, but the Vinashaya Chaduskatam part hadn't been done yet. So it's, our commentators say, it's a subtle, at least indirect, urging Ram begin the killing of demons, which happens immediately after by Shurpanaka coming, and that's another, from within the heart of Shurpanaka. So Ram, he's in his Bhagavan feature, but in his Paramatma feature, he's directing the desires. This question came up about the intelligence of devotees. Krishna gives intelligence, but the intelligence is to assist in his pastimes as well. Here's a little, probably it's out of sequence, but Bharata, took Shatrughna with him with separation from Ram, but his main wish is to please Ram. That's his main characteristic. Bharata was willing to leave the association of Ram so that Shatrughna could receive the affection of Yudhijit. That was already discussed. And also this part, it's the nature of true love. One sacrifices one's own needs and desires for one who one loves. And as mentioned, how to handle loving relationship with multiple personalities. So Bharata is teaching us, or the Ramayana is teaching us through his behavior. And all the while that they're in the palace of Yudhijit, their thoughts are with Ram. They're attached to Ram. And another feature of Bharata, the personality, is love and separation. He knew how to sustain love in separation. And we know from our Gaudiya Vaishnava teaching, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Or when there's love and separation, it increases the happiness when there's meeting. It's still just we'll go into the Leela, but this is just depicting his character. Again, this point of having to bear the suspicion. Now, here's Dasarath, and there's Ram, and there's Lakshman. And this same painting was shown when Vishvamitra wanted him to come to the forest. But this is also more appropriate when Ram is being told he has to go to the forest for 14 years. So due to his being the son of Kaikeyi, Bharata had to bear the burden of suspicion in the eyes of almost everyone of being involved in a plot against Ram. And he had to prove his innocence again and again. That's the bear the burden aspect of his name. So now into the Leela section. In the Leela section, he's in the palace of Yudhijit. Dasarath dies in the mood of separation from Ram. The messengers are sent swiftly to go to Yudhijit's place. Don't divulge what happened, but invite Bharata to come back urgently. Which is like, if you say urgent, well, what's urgent? It's a natural question. And he can put two and two together. He's very intelligent. So they made their journey back. This painting is meant to show this is Bharata holding the feet of his mother when he comes back. And there's musicians making announcements of he's come back. But then when he goes to see his father's not there. There's Shatrughna, there's Bharata, and where's father? And everybody's crying. And then he hears what happens, and he starts crying. And then his brazen mother, Kaikeyi, starts telling him the whole situation, thinking it's fantastic, you're going to be the new king. And when Bharata heard her narration, boldly, brazenly spoken, he was shocked. And you see the expression on his face. He started speaking very heavy things. I mean, he asked many questions first to make sure he got it right. But when he got it right, he was really heavy. He chastised her severely. calling what she had done sin and destruction. She had brought, sending faultless Ram to the forest along with Lakshman and Sita, to the extent of even disowning her. They have no longer any connection with you. I mean, he didn't kill her, and because he knew Ram wouldn't approve. He can't do anything that Ram would not approve. Kaikeyi is unworthy, but Ram would never approve, disown her, or kill her, or anything. After some time, there's a situation where the funeral is performed. Vishishta, the eldest son is to perform the funeral, but Ram is in the forest. And so it's Bharata's service. And so he and Shatrughna go, they do the funeral, and they're feeling feelings that you feel when you do a funeral, but these are transcendental feelings. And on their way back, Shatrughna sees Manthara, and they know the intrigue. Manthara's all decked out, nice jewelry, nice clothing, big smile. Kaikeyi is now going to be, the mother of the next king. And Shatrughna grabs her by the arm. First, somebody points out, there she is. He grabs her by the arm and drags her. She's screaming because she knows what's up. And he announces loudly, she's finished. And it means he's going to kill her. And Bharata intervenes, said Ram would never approve. If Ram would approve, I would have killed my mother. But Ram wouldn't approve, so you can't do this. They're very obedient to Ram. It's just binding them by the indications of Ram. Whatever he indicates, that's it. Left to right, backwards, forwards, up or down, whatever Ram says, that's it. So that's what this, is meant to indicate. A compass, his heart was aligned with the desire of Ram. That's Bharata, his personality. So after he found out about what happened, after saying really heavy things to Kaikeyi, and she was in shock. She thought he would be really pleased. I mean, that's what she was doing. She was doing to please him. And he's ready to disown her. And he walks out. And the first person he goes to see is Kaushalya. And Kaushalya speaks, with hurt voice and feelings. Oh, so congratulations. You're now the incumbent king. I hope you enjoy your role as the king. You and Kaikeyi were very expert in making this arrangement. And he starts crying. How can you think that I was part of this? Please understand. I had no, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I would give my life for Ram. You know my relationship with Ram. I would have nothing to do with this. Please don't think like that about me. And so her motherly affection towards Bharata wins. There we, she's consoling him. Remember, he's just the age is around 25. They were married when they were 12. We'll hear this a little while later. They were almost the same in age, just a day apart. We'll hear the detail. Still the older brother. So, but they were 12 when they were married, and they were living in Ayodhya for around 13 years before this event. So he's around 25. But he has affection for Kaushalya like he has for Ram. And Kaushalya has affection for Bharata like she has for Ram. And she says so when she's consoling him. And when he understands, because the softness of her heart, she was hurt, naturally. But her motherly affection won over. His sincerity, that what to do when you're misunderstood. Has it ever happened? Too many times, right? Bharata is profiling for us what to do. Now, his sincerity wins. Now, sometimes sincerity doesn't win, but you profile it anyways. You have to be, truthful. And, what's inside has to be demonstrated and consistently demonstrated. So if the misunderstanding continues, you continue anyways, because this is a world of duality, and sometimes that happens. But in Bharata's case, he had to bear the misunderstanding that he was part of this very wicked deed. So Kaushalya became understanding. He went to see others also. We'll get there. They performed the funeral, Vashishta presiding. Vashishta wants him to become king. We got to have a king. And he says, I'm not going to become king. I can't become king. I can't become king. I am going to bring Ram back. And, long speeches about it to everybody. They're not surprised and surprised. Because the kingdom, who wants kingdoms? So many people want kingdoms. And here it is. He didn't do anything. It is handed to him, and he doesn't want it. Because of his affection for Ram. And his affection for Ram is so great. He said, let's make roads going into the forest so the entire kingdom of Ayodhya can fall at Ram's feet and plead with him. And so they start making roads to go into the forest, following the path, because the driver of Ram, Sita, and Lakshman's chariot, he knows the way. And so the way that they went, they start building a road. I mean, it's like, this is just showing a few people building a road, but they build road and parks along the way and gardens and, a royal process. And when the roads are ready, off they go with a big army and elephants and everything to bring Ram back. That's his heart. And he's now in that position. And they get to the place where Guha is. And notice, it's just these Arabic people, they really like Ramayana. He gets to the place where Shinka Verapur, where Nishadha king named Guha is there. Now, we didn't hear the exchange, but now we're going to hear the exchange between Bharata and Guha. And when Guha sees this big army, he has his doubts. No, but he's a Nishadha, he's a hunter living in the forest. It means he's not a polished gentleman. But at the same time, he has high character. He has high character because of his devotion to the royal family. He had many times been to the palace and knew everybody. They knew him. He was, in his own way, refined. So I want to read what he says. Yeah. On seeing Bharata and his huge army from a distance, Guha grew suspicious of Bharata's motives. From here, this huge army looks like the ocean. If Bharata has come with evil intentions, as surely he must have, then he will either bind us with ropes or kill us for being devoted to Ram, desiring to acquire all that wealth of the kingdom, which was amassed with difficulty. Bharata is going to try to kill Ram. But Ram is my master and friend. Intent on Ram's interests, stay here on the bank of the Ganges, dressed in armor. Let all the ferrymen, accompanied by soldiers, remain on the river Ganges to protect it. Let 100 fishermen dressed in armor protect each of the 500 boats. 100 fishermen dressed in armor protect each of the 500 boats. That's if he wants to cross, don't let him cross. Because that he knows where he went. He went across the Ganges. So that the armored men protect the boats so he can't get the boats. If Bharata actually is kindly disposed towards Ram, this army will safely cross the river today. Then Guha approached Bharata directly to understand his intention. Guha said, "Seeing your vast army, my mind was filled with fear. I trust that you wish no harm to Ram. If that is the case, then my ferrymen can take you across the river and show you the way." Bharata breaks down emotionally and says, "May the time never come when any wickedness towards Ram enters my heart. Do not doubt my intentions, O Guha. I'm here to bring Ram back to Ayodhya. My glorious brother is as good as my father, and I long to see him again." So they have some exchanges, and Bharata wants to hear what happened when Ram came. Give me the details. I want to hear about my brother. And as Guha describes the details, including the detail of Guha making their matted locks, meaning take some kind of sap from trees and take their hair and make it into matted locks. And he wants to see he cries. "Can you show me the place where Ram rested for the night?" And he takes him to the place. There's still some leaves on the ground, but it's not so long after they left. And he wails piteously and makes this declaration: "For the rest of my life, I will also dress in tree bark. I will also wear matted locks. I will also sleep on the bare earth." And they spend the night just talking about Ram. The next morning, Guha makes all the arrangements, and all the boats that they have take the entire army with all their elephants and everything across the Ganges. And the next place they go is the ashram of Bharadraj Rishi, because that was where Ram went after crossing the Ganges. Remember Bharadraj Rishi? Oh, here's this text. Yes. Eager to know more about Ram's sojourn, Bharata inquired about Ram to Guha. Bharata heard that Ram had just some water to drink while at Sringavarapur, and that Lakshman was awake the entire night, staying as a guard for Ram and Sita. Guha further narrated how he helped them mat their hair in dreadlocks and then ferried them safely across the Ganges. And in more details. So they're across the Ganges, and Bharata is heading towards Bharadraj Rishi's ashram. Bharadraj Rishi was a disciple and student of Valmiki. When the Conchshell bird was hit with an arrow, Bharadraj Rishi was with him, saw the thing and heard the outcry of Valmiki, etc., etc. So he's very closely connected to Valmiki, and they visit his ashram. And when they visit his ashram, Bharadraj Rishi makes this inquiry of Bharat, what brings you all this way? Leaving aside the onerous business of managing the state, because of your mother's words, you are ruling the world as undisputed monarch. I trust that you have not come here with some dark intention toward the sinless and perfect Ram. Oh no, he thinks like this too. Oh no. Hearing this, tears flowed from Bharata's eyes as those same words were piercing his heart repeatedly. Now this is at least number 3, because Kaushalya, then Guha, and now Bharadraj Rishi. Now I can continue. I think I will continue. It's 8:15. When I was presenting this previously, we ended part 1 and this became part 2. We'll just continue in this discussion. There's the same text, so we'll move on. And I want to read this exchange between Bharadraj Muni and Bharata. Bharadraj Rishi was a highly learned sage with mystic powers to know past, present, and future. Because of that, Bharata felt, I have no hope. Even he is thinking like this. Bharata replied, even if you impute such motives to me, then I am truly ruined. I never approved my mother's aims. I cannot even imagine doing harm to Ram, nor will I ever accept the kingdom. I have come here to bring him back to Ayodhya. Falling at his feet, I shall make him return and then remain here in his place. Oh, all-knowing sage, please be gracious to me and show me where Ram is staying. Bharadraj replied, I was just testing you. Service to your superiors, self-control, and following in the footsteps of the godly are proper for you, since you were born in the dynasty descending from King Raghu. I surely knew of your intention and spoke only to heighten your resolve and indeed your fame. Your devotion to Ram is beyond doubt. I know where the righteous Ram is staying, along with Sita and Lakshman. Your brother is residing on the great mountain of Chitrakoot. You will certainly go there tomorrow. For now, Stay here with your ministers. Grant me this wish, for you are expert in satisfying people's desires. He wants to go, but he can't neglect the request of this exalted personality. So he spends the night with Bharata in his ashram, with his whole army. And then Bharadraj says, why did you come here alone and leaving your army behind? Why didn't you come with your army? Astonished, Bharata said, this is, I'm reading because it tells something about his character. We have already received sufficient hospitality from you. As forest dweller, you need only offer simple fruits, and this you have done. My army is vast and occupies a huge area of land. If I brought them here, they would all but wreck this holy site. So he didn't bring his army, but he stayed with Bharadraj. And what happens next is they okay, here's that text that I just read. To heighten your resolve and your fame. The following day, Bharata left Bharadraj ashram and reached Chitrakoot along with his army. When Lakshman saw a big army bearing the flag of the Ikshvaku dynasty, he got very angry, suspecting Bharata had come with evil intention. There we go again. And he wanted to kill them all. He asked Ram, just give me the word. They're all dead. I'll kill him instantly. Look at these arms. Look at my bow. Just give the word. And, there's this wonderful relationship between Ram and Lakshman, and he calms him down. He says, if you want the kingdom, I'll just tell Bharata to give the kingdom to you. Oh. This isn't Bharata's nature. He's come, my sense is he's come to plead with me to come back to Ayodhya. I'm going to fulfill the word of my father, but that's why he's come. So give up this hostility towards your brother. And they reunite. It's a beautiful scene. Maybe I'll. Very beautiful scene. This, loving relationships are fantastic. And this is transcendental loving relationship. Oh, here's something Ram says to Lakshman. Has Bharata ever done anything displeasing to you in the past? If you speak these words for the sake of the kingdom, I'll tell Bharata to give the kingdom to you. Certainly he will say, all right. So when he sees Ram, they climb up the Chitrakoot mountain, and it is a mountain. We took a yatra and went there, and it's up a mountain. It's a very nice place. Very nice place. Still today, very nice place. Very devoted people that reside there, and very simple, not commercialized, and all of that stuff that happens in sacred places. They see him from a distance. He tries running. It's a nice way of saying it. Although the ground was level, he kept tripping. And threw himself at Ram's feet. And Ram picked him up and embraced him. Let's see. They all sat together. There's Lakshman kneeling before Ram, sages and so forth in the vicinity. I'll read. When Bharata saw Ram dressed as an ascetic, his hair matted, he let out a cry and fell prostrate. Rising up again, he gazed with tear-filled eyes at his beloved brother, who appeared like Brahma, seated in his celestial assembly hall. Ram turned and smiled at Bharata, who, along with Shatrughna, was rushing toward him. Stumbling even as he ran over level ground, Bharata swiftly approached Ram and fell before him. So there's many paintings of this scene. Now this one doesn't show Ram in tree bark, but there's some, looks like Guha, or at least a forest person, and Vishishta and various exalted personalities in their assembly, Bharata and Shatrughna, and Ram and Lakshman. He's got his bow there, so that's Lakshman. Another beautiful painting. He's just clasping Ram's feet. Ram is giving affection to both Bharata and Shatrughna, as is to be expected. Ram raised his younger brother and placed him on his lap. Stroking his head, he said, "Your humility is your real qualification. By virtue of this wisdom, you can protect the entire earth. Always seek the counsel of learned Brahmins and rule with confidence," because he's saying many things, to convince him, like, I'm incompetent. I'm just a little boy. He's only 2 days younger, but I'm a little boy. How can I rule? And many, many, many different explanations. He tries every way. Ram is determined. There's one of the questions that was raised in the course of readings from Ramayana. Is there a section of Ramayana that's like Bhagavad Gita? Within the history of Mahabharata, there's Bhagavad Gita, the summary of Krishna's teachings. And the answer is yes. There's a Ram Gita section where he is giving instructions to Bharata, not just how to rule, but how to be a civilized person. So Ram Gita from this exchange is very significant. It's long. Bharata was unable to convince Ram to return to Ayodhya without fulfilling the promise given to their father. Falling at Ram's feet, Bharata voiced his doubts. "My Lord, how does the power to rule our vast kingdom exist in me? I'm young and inexperienced, nor am I possessed of any great ability. Surely the kingdom will meet with ruin under my guidance." That's where actually it's in reverse order. Ram said, "Your humility will make you successful." Now he speaks of his humility as wisdom. And as you know, Bhagavad Gita says when Krishna is asked about what is knowledge, the very first item of knowledge is humility. It's wisdom. It's not just information kind of knowledge, but it's character kind of knowledge. Because one who has character has knowledge. One who has bhakti has knowledge. Without character, you may have information, but not wisdom or knowledge, real knowledge. So he tried, and he said, I'll lie down and fast until death. So Shatrughna made the arrangement. He was going to lie down, and Ram said, "You can't do this. I'm giving you an instruction. You go back and rule the kingdom. And then is when he said, when I finish my exile, I will, if you so desire, I can resume the kingdom. So that's where Bharata then had a plan. Plan Z was he brought sandals with him and embellished with gold. He put them on the ground and said, please place your feet in these sandals or on these sandals. Dear Ram, let these shoes be the rulers of the kingdom, and I shall remain as their servant. These will definitely supply the needs and maintain the assets of the people. Immediately, Ram put his foot on the sandals and then took them off, handing them back to Bharata. I don't know what happened. What happened here? Boy, it really jumped forward. Whew. Sorry about that. Celebrated. So there's many, many paintings of this. This is another nice one. The queens are there. Vashishta is there. Bharata and Shatrughna are there. Shatrughna is being consoled. Bharata is being blessed. Now this painting has two versions. They're almost the same. Here's the second version that's almost the same. There's a little bit difference in the background, but Ram is blessing Bharata with his head bowed before Ram. And as everyone retires, Kaikeyi manages to have a little private discussion with Ram and pours out her heart. What a foolish person. Great offense to you. And let's see if I have what Ram says. Ram says is really wonderful. Well, I can't find it. What Ram says is something like this. Does anybody know exactly what Ram says? Something like, I hold no ill feelings. This is all providential, essentially. It's very something quite similar to what he said to Lakshman back in Ayodhya. We'll hear about Lakshman probably tomorrow. This is not Kaikeyi. Kaikeyi, you've always shown affection to me as much as and even more than affection you have for Bharata. So I just take this as a providential event. And, there was no ill feeling. That's exceptional. Someone does something really, really cruel. There's some feelings. But Ram doesn't have those feelings. It's providential and so be it. I wish I had those words. So here's Bharata's parting words. For the coming 14 years, I shall live in a hut outside Ayodhya. I shall survive only on fruits and roots, and my hair will be matted. At the end of this time, if I do not see you return, then I shall enter blazing fire. There we go. There's an elephant and a lion. This is connected. This is not from Valmiki Ramayana, it's a commentary. There's an analogy that once a wild elephant trumpeted loudly to attack a lion or lioness and their cub. The lion came out of the cave to check what danger might be there, followed by the lioness and the cub. As the lion went ahead to face off with the elephant, the lioness took the little cub back into the cave. Similarly, Sri Ramachandra is a lion among men who went out of Ayodhya to face off with elephant-like demons in Dandaka. The sandals carefully took Bharata back to Ayodhya to protect him. As the commentators like to observe, Bharata did not carry the sandals back to Ayodhya, rather the sandals carried him back safely and consoled him. Nice. There's a lot of poetry, as we said at the very beginning, within Ramayana. There's a lot of poetic expressions, and poetic expressions lend themselves to different understandings and feelings and so forth. So, Bharata, the personality of Bharata, teaches us many, many lessons about misfortune, being misunderstood, abiding by virtue, being faithful to the person or persons who one is feeling this is my shelter. So this is a very important personality in the whole of Ramayana. And his virtue convinces people to have the correct understanding of his nature and to attract the mercy of the personality of Godhead. Okay, so now application. How can we have this kind of surrender? Anticipating that our devotee is going to ask that question. Surrender means not doing what the body and the mind ask us to do, but with your heart, what the heart wants to do. Heart, in this case, when the heart is reposed on the ultimate goal of life. Take to your heart some wisdom coming from a surrendered person and put it into practice. Then you too can move forward in surrender, regardless of the circumstance. To do so, hear Harikatha. Harikatha cleanses the heart, which leads to increased faith. Faith catalyzes surrender. As faith increases, surrender increases. That we're attempting. Harikatha or Ramkatha, Krishna Katha has an effect. It cleanses. And as the heart becomes cleansed, faith is naturally nourished. Faith precipitates surrender, and surrender can increase. So that's our lesson, practical application lesson. When Ram returned after 14 years of exile, he sent Hanuman ahead. In case Bharata over these 14 years has grown accustomed to the kingdom and he would like to continue as the ruler, then he should continue as the ruler. So go ahead. You're good at intelligence, meaning spy work, and find out. So Hanuman does that. He goes to Nandagram, that's the place that's outside Ayodhya. And here's a very nice painting. It shows he's in a cave instead of a little grass hut. But here's the text. This is our last slide. Upon his arrival at Nandagram, Hanuman saw Bharata dressed in tree bark and having matted hair. Bharata was living in a small cottage, not in a cave, but it's a nice painting. subsisting only on fruits and roots, and he appeared to be very miserable and emaciated. Notice there's his weapons hanging on the wall, and there's the shoes on the throne, and there he is in matted locks and tree bark. Hanuman then approached Bharata, announcing, I have come as a messenger from Ram. He inquires about your welfare and wishes to inform you that he will soon return to Ayodhya. Hearing these glorious words, Bharata's face immediately lit up with great delight. Then, becoming exhilarated with transcendental emotion, he suddenly fainted to the ground. That's our Bharata. Now there's some other images that somehow didn't make it into this presentation. And it has to do with the computer crash that happened about 3 weeks ago and had to rebuild everything. But there's a beautiful scene, beautiful painting where he's trembling, placing the shoes on the throne. Shatrughna is watching, the queens are watching. He's so devoted to Ram in separation. Very faithful. Bharata. Okay. We have some time for some discussion. So, do we have a microphone? Well, up here. Oh, in the back. Okay, fine. In the back is fine.
She's asking. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Could you turn the lights on? Thanks. Lights? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So this is about Bharat being miserable and emaciated.
Is it about Bharata? Say it slower again.
Yeah, Bharat. This is about Bharat being miserable and emaciated.
Being miserable. Yeah. Okay.
So my confusion was what takes priority, because Bharat had a service to take care of the kingdom while Ram was away. I mean, of course, being empowered by Ram's sandals. What takes priority? My understanding was service would take priority, then his austerity should not impact his service, is what I understood.
Correct.
Okay. That's what I wanted to check.
To do service, you don't need royal comforts. Now, if one accepts royal comforts, as Ram did when he returned, it's not a blemish. But Bharata didn't want to be above. He wanted to be below. So if he's going to, I'm going to.
Sure.
That was his mood. Service mood. Looking up.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Next.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, each of your lecture has been an ocean of inspirations and instructions. The moment I feel that, okay, there's so much to learn from this personality and I'm trying to even grapple some important inspirations, here comes the next personality, which feels like even more to learn from.
There's more coming this morning. And then this week, Lakshman. And, so many. Sarama, and so forth.
Very enriching, Maharaj.
Tara. I mean, there's this Trijata. We're going to hear.
Yes, Maharaj. My question, you mentioned that Shatrughna was respecting Bharata and his affection was genuine. Out of love, he left with Bharata, not out of obligation. So I was wondering, what if service is done to another out of obligation? and one is on the receiving end or one may be on the giving end, how to make it more from the heart than just as an obligation?
Nice question. Well, Bhaktivinoda Thakur addresses this very nicely. Naturally, our acharyas address all topics. And his statement, his declaration is that service out of duty or obligation is not on the same platform as duty or activities out of love. So your question specifically is how to transform duty to love or affection. And that's the bhakti principle. So bhakti principle starts with regulation, and regulation is mode of goodness. It's, we do mode of goodness. This is Lord Kapila Dev teaching. Action in the mode of goodness is devotional service. In the mode of goodness is I do because I know it will purify me. I do because it is good for me. It's the right thing to do. I do because it's the right thing to do. That's mode of goodness. And mode of goodness is good. While one is engaged in dutiful service, what's necessary is giving attention to the bhakti principle. Or what Prabhupada describes in Srimad Bhagavatam as change of heart. Canto 2, chapter 3, devotional service, change of heart. It's the change of heart. It's a nice topic. I plan to discuss it at length during either the Christmas weekend or Vyasa Puja weekend. This transformation of heart, because it's really important. There's change of behavior towards the mode of goodness kinds of behavior. And then there's change of heart. So your question is, how do you get that change of heart? And it's you pay attention to it, and there's more to the whole topic. But it's yearning for it, enthusiasm towards it, embracing, calling out for mercy. And otherwise it'll remain duty. And one can carry on dutifully for a long time. But to get the change of heart, the bhakti principle needs to be exercised. And it's looking towards that spontaneous stage of devotion, where it's out of attachment and affection. And praying, becoming attached to persons who have it, and aspiring to be like them, not imitate, but aspiring to be like them, aspiring to get mercy from them. And without that additional effort, then devotional service can carry on for a long time, lifetimes, in the mode of goodness. It's acting from the heart. And the principle, we discussed this many times, but acting from the heart, according to Rupa Goswami, means Krishna is to be pleased. That's the change of heart. That's the bhakti principle. That's at the heart of bhakti. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj. Just follow up on that. In day-to-day dealings, when one is on the receiving end of a service done out of obligation, then is there something that I can do to make it more from the heart for the other person?
Nice question. there's principles and then there's details. The detail is, one of my favorite phrases is it depends. So in depending upon the details, then there can be application of principles in different ways, in different combinations. But one of the best principle is to model it. Like how did Prabhupada, we go to, Prabhupada to understand things. How did Prabhupada change the heart of people? By his Krishna consciousness, by his demeanor, by his qualities, by his affection. And he was very liberally giving and very powerfully having from the heart character. And people felt it. And that changed their heart. Don't do that with some expectation, because then, it's a trap. You're thinking, I'm up there and they're down there. That's not wholesome. But you model and you continue and continue and continue, because if you're going to be a transformation agent, you have to have that which you want the transformed to have and be consistent. Not, occasionally. So when you carry that quality, you can be the better transformation agent. That's a principle. And then how it's applied depends upon time, place, circumstance.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I have two questions.
Okay.
The first one is maybe a simple question. Why did Bharata take his entire army to bring back Rama? That would raise suspicions, right? Like if you go with a big army and he had to face the burden of it.
First of all, let me compliment you for speaking very clearly. I didn't have any trouble at all to understand anything that you said. So thank you very much. I don't know of any commentary saying why. The understanding, it's just an understanding, an intuitive understanding, that what he wanted to do was to show it wasn't just him, but the whole of Ayodhya. There's power in the army and this and that. So it's a majesty display to move the heart. We all want you, everyone, please. But the appeal wasn't so much pointing to all the army people and everything, but the queens were brought, the ministers were brought, the brahmanas were brought, the general people were brought, elephant, we all want. How can you say no? That's my intuitive understanding. No. If somebody's listening that's familiar with Ramayana more than in commentaries, you can send something into the chat box and we can share it with everybody. Go ahead.
Thank you, Maharaj. The second question is, Ramayana is all about it's a tale about how to deal with multiple relationships, like you said, right, Maharaj?
That's one of the things it is. Yes,
yes, Maharaj. But how do we take the principles from it? Because those principles seem very idealistic, where Ram is following the word of his father as an ideal son. And you also mentioned Maharaj, like Kaikeyi also came and she even tried, I don't know if she pacified Rama to come back to Ayodhya.
No, she wasn't asking for him to come back to Ayodhya. She was asking for forgiveness.
Okay, Maharaj. But all these standards seem very ideal. And I also remember like Srila Prabhupada, like always sometimes used to say, like, don't try to imitate, right? So in today's world, like where the parents are not ideal, the son is not ideal, the brother is not ideal, the wife is not ideal.
Welcome.
Right. It's all like painful struggles. So how do we take these idealistic principles and apply in this broken chain of relationships that we have to, in our day-to-day existence?
I mean, your question is not the same, but my response is going to be similar to Atulya's question. And that is, you model it. Application of principle is going to vary according to time, place, and circumstance. But if you, you're not responsible for how everyone is, you're responsible for how you are. And if you're striving, despite, chaos around you in relationships and everything else and everything else and everything else, you're striving for that connection. And you have, there's this saying, you have the North Star, you have this aspiration that you carry in your heart. You want to be, not imitate, but be like someone who you look up to, whoever that someone might be. You want to be like that person. You want them to give their mercy to you so that you can become more like them than you are today. So if that, that's bhakti. But by qualified persons praying for the mercy of qualified, this is a standard Gaudiya teaching. Those who get it make progress towards those elevated standards, despite the broken relationships and chaos in the world and everything. It's effort and mercy, striving, depending upon mercy. It's everything to do with these 18 cardinal teachings. I have no other shelter, you're my only shelter. I'm depending upon the mercy of the devotees. I'm depending upon the mercy of the Supreme Lord, and I'm making very sincere efforts. And that's what you can do. And we're not the ideal personalities with ideal anything either, what to speak of everybody else. But we are responsible for ourselves and our relationship with Krishna, and then in concentric circles out, our relationships with others. And, be soft in heart. If you make mistakes, acknowledge them. And even if people dismiss you or whatever, you continue to be true to principles and applying the principles and depending upon mercy. So have really good role models, be closely connected to Guru and Krishna as much as you can, and you continue to strive in that direction. And as we just, this thing here, continue hearing Hari Katha. I just was listening to a recorded lecture Prabhupada was speaking about the power of the holy name. He was narrating on the Ajamil story. So he was in Honolulu, and he was telling the devotees, whatever happens, don't stop chanting. He had such faith in chanting. Krishna will recognize, even if he should say, people fall away. They criticize me saying, Swami, you're depriving us of necessities of life. But those necessities are sinful. sinful activity, necessities, eating meat and illicit sex, and they're necessities of life. But so take the chanting. So he had such faith, and by his faith, it had impact. People took to chanting, and no matter what happens, never give up chanting. So you have some shelter, and then as strength and purity comes like this, then faith grows, and faith, you apply yourself with faith, and realization comes, and there you go. And you can't do better than that. And although you're going to make mistakes along the way too, and be less than perfect along the way too, but you plead with people to accept your effort and try to continue to purify and be exemplary.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, Radha. Clear, right? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So my question is on the fact that Ram, Lakshman, Bharata, and Shatrugana are only a few days apart, right? They're only a few days apart. But the younger brothers are so loyal to Lord Ram, even though they're a few days apart.
That's right.
But they're, isn't it too loyal? Because
microphone.
Because isn't it too loyal? Because over here, brothers and sisters don't treat their siblings nothing like Lord
Of course
Ram.
not. This is Kali Yuga, and we got to be Kali Yuga people.
And if that's the case, then Vishaka should be treating me like.
If that's the case, then what?
Vishaka,
what is going to do what?
Vishaka should be treating me like an older sister, right?
She should respect you as the older sister. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you should behave like the older sister too. Be like the older brother Ram is to he's like their father. He's so affectionate, he's so loving, he's so caring, he's so perfect, he's so kind. You should be like the older sister. Touche.
So is this how siblings should be?
What?
Is this how siblings should be, even though they're a few days apart?
Well, if you're a cultured person, you follow culture. And if you're not a cultured person, you complain about everything. And you do the best you can in between. Principles are applied differently according to time, place, circumstance. So your main effort should be, let me be the exemplary elder sister. Not your main concern should be, she should be the exemplary younger sister. And you'll find a better result if you put things in that sequence. And that's not just you, it's life. If you want others to become more ideal, become more ideal. I mean, same different application of the question your mother was asking. How can you influence people that, need help to come more from the heart? Okay? How are we doing? Anyone else?
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Would you like me to read Kaikeyi's?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Can you do
I
it?
open it up.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Thank you.
So this is from Krishna Dharma Prabhu's.
Good.
Okay.
It's beautiful.
So the queen Kaikeyi fell at Ram's feet, saying, I am entirely ignorant and have acted like a fool. She said tearfully, but now I understand that you are the eternal supreme person. Who would not be bewildered upon seeing your human pastimes? O Lord, please forgive me. and destroy my attachments to family and wealth. Ram smiled at her with affection and spoke as follows. It was I who, for the sake of the gods, prompted you to act as you did.
Ah, it's true. He did. Yes. Then?
And then he said, you are not to blame, nor am I angry with you. Hardly anyone knows my real nature. I am never affected by desire in the same way as ordinary men. I act simply to reciprocate the service and love I am given. Gentle lady, return to Ayodhya and live peacefully. Think of me day and night, and you will soon be freed from all your attachments to this temporary world.
With that, let's take a break. I see they're bringing some snacks out. It's not like a full meal, but can we come back in 15 minutes? Because I do have to end at 10 or 10:15 latest, because there's a big, thing going to happen in the temple room after that. So we have to be timely. We can't do what we've been doing. Little break, 10-minute break, 15-minute break, what? 10-minute break. So check your watch out. We'll come back at 10:15, 9:15, 9:15, 9:15, 9:15.
Wear your jackets, please.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're now going to spend some time discussing about Jitayu and his brother. So we'll start with Jitayu. Are we there? You need a different slide. We're going to Jitayu. Okay. Jitayu, in the course of considering the 9 processes of bhakti, Jitayu represents the stage of Atma Nivedana. Atma Nivedana. Full self-surrender. He gave his life to the service of Ram. He not only risked his life, he gave his life towards when Sampati hears about his brother, when Sampati hears about his brother, that his brother died, he's very, very keen because he hasn't seen his brother in a long, long time. And he hears from Hanuman how Hanuman was such a valiant person. He gave his life for Ram. So body, mind, words, this is this standard of Atma Nivedana, and that's Jitayu. Whoops. Yeah. Let's go to the 18 cardinal lessons of Ramayana, and number 9 out of the 18. A person who is eligible to surrender unto the Lord should engage in devotional service in full on a daily basis, with one's mind fixed upon the Sharanya, that's the one who one is taking shelter of, and wait for the time his body falls dead. Shabari and Jitayu are examples. She, right to the very end, was like Jitayu. And in the 18 cardinal lessons, there's number 14. Even great souls, can you turn the lights down? Even great souls encounter calamities in the material world. Therefore, one should understand the nature of this material world, all the while looking toward the ultimate solution to not return to this world. Continue steadfast devotional service while going through any calamity. We heard this about Ram. One of the lessons overall in Ramayana is this one. And both Ram and Jitayu met reversals and continued steadfast despite the reversals. Let's hear a little bit about the origin of Jitayu. Jitayu took birth, Jitayu and Sampati took birth as sons of the great sage Kashyapa. And we know who Kashyapa is because we saw that genealogy many times. Kashyapa was the son of Marichi, and Vinita was one of his wives. Kashyapa had 13 wives. They were all daughters of, who were they daughters of? Daksha, right. Very good. You're paying attention. Thank you. So one of the daughters, her name was Vinita. And interestingly, non-humans were born from that combination. Aruna was their son. From Aruna and his wife, Shani, Jitayu and Sampati were born. And how did all this happen? Because they're Prajapatis. They were invested with powers or potencies by the personality of Godhead, Vishnu, to help fill up the universe, because it was a service given to Brahma to build the universe. But where'd that power to build the universe come from? From Vishnu. And the powers to fill up the universe, where'd that come from? From Vishnu. And the persons who did it were the Prajapatis. That's the understanding of how Kashyapa and Vinita produced non-humans. It's the Prajapati empowerment to do so. They were brothers, and they were born in a different yuga. The yuga in which Rama was born was the yuga following Satya Yuga. So millions of years before Ram lived, Jitayu and Sampati were born, and they lived. And they enjoyed flying here and there. They flew and flew and flew, soaring higher and higher. They promised the sages in Mount Kailash, we will catch the sun when he rises and keep up with him until he sinks behind the western hills. So they flew and flew and flew into the sky, bent on doing better than the other, playful brothers. At high noon, Jitayu was visibly affected. Jitayu was visibly affected by the fierce heat. So his elder brother, Sampati, covered Jitayu with his wings. But that created a problem. His wings burned. And Sampati lost his ability to fly and fell headfirst into the Vindhya mountains. Now, Sampati is going to give us the history of that event in further detail. But fortunately, Jitayu was saved by his elder brother, and he descended in the region of Panchavati, which is the current day Nasik. So many, many thousands of years later, in Panchavati, during Lord Ram's exile, he, Jitayu, somehow recognized Ram. And you'll hear that interesting history. He recognized Ram. And he expressed his past friendship, because when Ram and Lakshman saw this vulture, they didn't know what to think. Maybe it's a Rakshasa, let's be worried. But when he spoke very affectionately about Dasarath, immediately that impacted Ram's heart. Now, it's not described right there. What was that relationship? It took a while to find out what that relationship was. How he had friendship with Dasarath. So the explanation goes like this. Dasarath was a very qualified king in every way. And even when there was drought, he had sufficient grain supply that no one felt any inconvenience. And everything else was so well, nicely organized by Dasarath. for the welfare of the citizens. He was like a father that took care of his family, his citizens. And that one time there was a drought that went on for 11 years, but no one felt inconvenience. But in the 12th year, there was still scorching heat and no rain. So Dasarath was concerned. He consulted astrologers. And after examining, the astrologers came to discern that Shani, or the Saturn planet, had a direct gaze upon his kingdom, and that was the problem, making things very hot and dry. So Dasarath became very angry, and he had powers. He got on his chariot and zoomed off to Saturn. And as he was approaching Saturn, it became hotter and hotter and hotter. And his stern gaze toppled Dasarath's chariot. So Dasarath's chariot started plunging back to earth. And as his chariot was plunging back to earth, who would show up but Jitayu? And Jitayu's body was so big that Dasarath's chariot, his horses, and Dasarath could rest on one wing. And Dasarath was really grateful. He saved his life. And then he asked Jitayu, can you help me stop Saturn or Shani from doing his thing? So Jitayu agreed, and they started flying towards Shani. And Shani was so pleased that, see this determination of this great, powerful king, that he agreed that he would shift his gaze. And so Dasarath's kingdom was now saved from drought. Compliments of Jitayu. So Dasarath was very, very pleased and very grateful. So he extended a benediction, anything that you would like. And Jitayu's one request is, when you have a son, please allow me to have affection for your son like my son. So Dasarath agreed. And that's how they had a friendship. It's said often, and that was the friendship. So he's in the Panchajanya area, and here comes Ram and Sita and Lakshman. So Jitayu volunteered some service, and his service was to protect Sita whenever Ram went out with Lakshman into the forest. And so they were very happy. And there we see he perched himself in a nearby tree and was always on the lookout for the welfare of Sita, especially when they were away from the Panchajanya cottage. Now, when Sita was kidnapped, Jitayu was asleep. And she called out for Jitayu, and her request of Jitayu was, find Ram and let Ram know I'm being taken away. But Jitayu's response was a little different. I can't stand by and let a terrible personality take Sita away, not while I'm still alive. So, what happened here? Did I show you this slide? No, okay. So notice his beak is wide open. Very nice. Hearing Sita's cries, Jitayu awakened, and seeing how she was being roughly handled by Ravana, he challenged the king of the Rakshasas, saying, "Oh, Ravana, I am Jitayu, the king of the vultures. How can you dare lay your hands on the wife of another? Beware, you are carrying a poisonous snake in your arms. I am now 60,000 years old. So now we know his age. And without weapons. And you are young with many weapons. But I will not allow you to carry away Sita. I warn you, give up your evil intentions or prepare to be hurled from your chariot like a ripe fruit falling from a tree. How could a king, observant of the codes of martial conduct, codes of a king, touch someone else's wife? The wives of kings especially deserve protection. Arrest this degraded idea of touching another man's wife. A sober person should not do that, for which another might ridicule him. A wise man should protect others' wives as much as he does his own. Since you are sinful and fickle by nature, how have you achieved the position of a ruler? Like a low-class rogue riding in a celestial vehicle. One who is by nature lusty cannot get rid of that nature. For nobility does not reside for long in the house of the wicked. Since the righteous Ram has committed no crime in your city or kingdom, why do you commit crime against him? If Kara, while residing in Janastan, exceeded his limits on account of Shurpanaka and was therefore slain by Ram, tell me truthfully how that was Ram's fault, for which you are now kidnapping his wife. Immediately set Sita free. Who will perform an act which is not conducive to righteousness? As long as I am alive, you cannot take away Sita. I have to do what is pleasing to the great soul Ram and to King Dasarath, even at the risk of my life. Wait a minute. Oh, Ravana, look, I shall offer you hospitality in the form of a fight as best I can. That was a long message. And, he snarled and kept going. And so Jitayu attacked. And when Jitayu attacked, Ravan fired so many arrows, stuck into his body. Sound room? It's not moving? Watch the magic. He knows how to make it happen. Okay. There's where he's got his beak wide open. Now comes, challenge number 2. Jitayu smashed his chariot to pieces. He said he would. And so he fell to the ground, as did his chariot. Now they're battling on the ground. All the while, according to Valmiki Ramayana, he's got a hold of Sita's arm. Here's the second challenge. Oh, less intelligent Ravana. Surely it is for the slaughter of the Rakshasas that you're trying to carry away the wife of Ram. With your friends and relatives, ministers, army, and retinue, you are drinking deadly poison, not foreseeing the results of their activities. The ignorant quickly perish, as you will too soon, since you are caught in the noose of death like a fish that has swallowed a hook and bait. How will you get free? The manners in which you, a coward, have executed this deed denounced by the world is the path trodden by thieves, not heroes. You will shortly lie down dead on the ground like your brother Kara. Not brother, they're cousins, but brother. You have committed such an outrageous action for your own destruction, as a person may do at the time of death. So he puts up a big fight, but he's 60,000 years old. And there he is with that donkey at the top of his head again. And pierced with arrows. And Jitayu grabs his hair and pulls his hair and claws the side of his body and makes big marks on the side of his body. Then Ravan gets his sword out. He has 20 arms, remember, and chops his arm, chops his wing. And there's so many, this celebrated event. There's the nice sun, some birds flying around. And he chops his arm. The fighting continued for nearly an hour. Finally, in desperation, Ravana took up his sword and cut off Jitayu's wings, feet, and flanks, causing him to fall to the ground, mortally wounded. In urgent distress, Sita rushed to where Jitayu lay, embracing him with tears in her eyes. Ravana, however, quickly grabbed Sita by the hair and carried her off as she cried out in grief, "Rama, Rama." There he is, chopping off his wing. Here it shows with he's got an arrow, but it's his sword that cut off his wings and feet and so forth. Now, this is one of those paintings that shows everything in one picture. Here's his wing being chopped and some blood coming out of the side of his wing. Down here, they're in Panchajanya, and it's very nice. Here, Ravana is coming as if he's a Brahmana, and so forth. It's a nice painting also. Sita's in great distress seeing Jitayu killed in this way. Jitayu was no match for Ravana's strength and was mortally wounded. So there's the broken chariot. There's an upside down horse. There's Jitayu with chopped wings. There's Ravana grabbing Sita with at least two of his arms and then chopping with some other arms. And over here, he's flying away. And there's Sita dropping her ornaments on top of Rishimukh mountain. So fast forward, Ram finds that Sita is missing, and they're traveling through the forest, looking everywhere, searching for Sita. And searching for Sita, finally, they find Jitayu. And there's Jitayu lying on the ground, barely alive, and Ram embraces him and with great affection asks Jitayu, did he see Ravana did he see Sita? Which way did she go? And so forth and so forth. He does his funeral. There's Lakshman doing the rituals of bathing his body, and then Ram blesses that his soul will attain the spiritual world for his unrestricted service to Lord Ram. Jitayu, just before he left his body, he told that was Ravana and which way he was headed, because that was what they were asking. And then finally, the funeral, and Ram saying, I didn't get to perform the funeral for my father, but now I'm performing the funeral for my father's friend. And you don't perform a funeral generally for a vulture, but he's not ordinary. Many nice paintings of this event. Jitayu indicated to Lord Ram that Ravana abducted Sita at an inauspicious time. Inauspicious time means it was at a time when he's quickly going to lose what he had gained because of the particular time. Ravana took Sita away at a particular time of day known as Vinda. If a person loses something at that time, he will surely reclaim it very soon. My dear Ram, do not be overly aggrieved because of Sita, for you shall certainly regain her after killing the Rakshasa king in battle. And his last words were Ram, Ram. Ram said, I am more saddened at the death of Jitayu, who selflessly gave his life for my sake, than the kidnapping of Sita. O Jitayu, with my permission, go to that transcendental world. Since I have purified you, you may now go there. Let it be known that Jitayu will attain the highest destination as a reward for service rendered unto me. So that's Jitayu's story. And then comes the Sampati story. Another nice painting. Yeah, we mentioned this. Although he didn't get to perform his father's funeral, he performed the funeral rites for Jitayu. So he's a great personality in Ramayana. Then comes Sampati, his brother. Remember, Sampati lost his wings. And there's a nice story we'll hear Sampati tell. But he was present at the southern part of India where the Vanaras that were heading in that direction, headed by Angada, were going. And when they couldn't find, Angada starts complaining about his mistrust in Sugriva. I'm not going back. I'm going to fast until death because Sugriva is such a wicked person, etc., etc., etc. Better to die right here than be killed by Sugriva. And his mood is very heavy, and there's many Vanaras that decide to lay down in kusa grass and fast until death. And Sampati, the brother of Jitayu, speaks loud enough that they can hear him. And he says, this is fantastic. I don't have any wings, but my meal is coming to me. So I'll just wait until they die. And when they die, I'll have my meal because he's a vulture. That's what vultures do. And while hearing this, Hanuman speaks about the full surrender of Jitayu, which Sampati really is attracted to. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah. This is after Angada announces he's going to fast till death. You have heard in its entirety of the service rendered by Jitayu, the king of the vultures, who was desirous of pleasing Sita. Similarly, all living beings, even those born in animal species, do what is pleasing to Ram, giving up their lives like us. Bound by love and compassion for Ram, people serve each other. Therefore, give up your very lives in the attempt to serve him. Jitayu, who knew what duty was, did a thing pleasing to Ram by laying down his life. We have traversed a difficult path in order to please Lord Ram, and we are now exhausted and about to lose our lives without having found Sita. Jitayu was fortunate to be slain by Ravan, for thus he attained the supreme destination and is freed from fear of Sugriva, like Angada is afraid. The monkeys have fallen into calamity by the death of Jitayu and King Dasarath, and by the abduction of Sita. Ram and Lakshman's exile in the forest with Sita, Ram's slaying of Vali with an arrow, and the annihilation of the Rakshasas because of Ram's anger, all these brought about by the boons of which Kaikeyi requested. So he's glorifying Jitayu and lamenting that they're not as fortunate as Jitayu. And he's in a mountain cave and he hears all this. Jitayu calls out, "Can you bring me out of my mountain cave? I want to hear more about my brother. I haven't heard about my brother in thousands of years." So the Vanaras say, "No problem, he's going to eat us anyways after we fast till death. We can give him some service." So he comes down from the mountain because they bring him down, and he asks further about Jitayu. What are the circumstances of Jitayu? And they give him the circumstances. And I'm going to read a little bit again. So there he is, Jitayu, looking as they're looking out into the distance by the sea. He gives his personal story. Long, long ago, after Indra killed Vritrasura, Jitayu and I wanted to test our prowess and decided to challenge the king of heaven, Indra. After soaring high into the sky up into the heavenly planets, we defeated Indra in battle. Then, having become very proud, we decided to rise even higher. Thereafter, as we approached the sun, Jitayu grew faint from the great heat. To save him, I covered Jitayu with my wings. However, as a result, my wings have been burned, and I fell down on the Vindhya mountains. Angada interrupts and says, "If you're actually the elder brother of Jitayu and our well-wisher, then give us information about the vote of Ravan." Sampati replies, "Because I'm now very old and my wings are burnt, I'm unable to physically serve Ram. I can, however, do something with my power of speech. I was told that a young lady was carried away by Ravana." He was told the young lady was carried away by Ravana while crying out, "Rama, Rama." She dropped some ornaments to the ground. I know that this Ravana is the king of the Rakshasas, and his kingdom, Lanka, is situated on an island 100 yojanas from the southern shore. Because I'm a descendant of Kashyapa and Vinita, right? Kashyapa and Vinita. My vision expands far more than 100 yojanas. Thus I can see the golden city from here. My dear monkeys, you will be able to find Sita in Lanka, guarded by the Rakshasa women. Now please be so kind as to grant me a favor in return. Take me to the ocean so that I can offer water to the departed soul of my brother. So they do that. He does the oblation for his departed brother. Then Jambavan asks, how did you come to learn that Sita had been abducted by Ravan? Because he said he heard it. So here's a little story within the story, within the story, within the story. After my wings were burned and I fell onto the Vindhya mountains, my son, Suparshva, began to care for me and bring me food. Once I was very hungry, and when Suparshva returned home without food, I chastised him. My son then said, while searching for flesh today, I happened to see a giant Rakshasa carrying away a young woman through the air. I wanted to bring both of them to you to eat. But the Rakshasa asked me in a friendly manner for me to allow him to pass by. Thus, I could not refuse his request. Afterwards, the Siddhas came and informed me of Ravana's identity, saying that it was fortunate for me that this Rakshasa had not killed me. The Siddhas told him. Sampati could see that the monkeys were now confident in his friendship. He then continued telling his life story. After I fell onto the Vindhya mountains, I remained unconscious for 6 days. When I came to my senses, I went to see the great sage Nishakara, who was living nearby and was known to my brother and to me. When I met the Rishi, he asked me how my wings had been burned, and I explained the entire incident. I explained that after falling from the sky and not hearing from my brother, in my crippled condition, I contemplated committing suicide by jumping from the mountain peak. Thus, as I stood before him, tears flowing from my eyes, Nishakara replied, do not despair, for I give you the following benediction. When, at a future date, you give information to the monkeys about Sita, your wings will reappear with renewed energy. Saying this, the Nishakara retired to his cottage, and I crawled back to my place in the Vindhya mountains. Thereafter, I simply spent my time waiting for your arrival. After 8,000 years passed, the Rishi Nishakara gave up his body and went to heaven. Now, in his absence, I had begun to doubt the validity of his words. Then Sampati continued speaking to the monkeys. A pair of wings suddenly sprouted on his body, while simultaneously he felt a surge of youthful energy. With great delight, Sampati encouraged the monkeys to resume their search for Sita. Then, as Sampati soared into the sky, the monkeys headed south, rejuvenated with new hope. So there's Sampati looking really big and indicating where Sita is in Lanka. And his wings are starting to sprout, and off he goes into the sky, flying away. So this is their last slide. A person who is eligible to surrender unto the Lord should engage in devotional service in full on a daily basis. We read this, remember, number 9. So like Shabari, Jitayu also demonstrates this exalted quality. And it's 5 minutes to 10. That's it for today's presentation on personalities from Ramayana. We'll take a little bit of time for discussion, especially if there's a microphone. That would be very nice. And if somebody can turn on the light in the back, that would also be very nice.
I have a mic.
Oh, you have a microphone. Go ahead.
Yes. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Danvat Pranam. My question is, are reversals trying to teach the living entities something in life? And how do we stay steadfast while going through the reversals?
How do you stay in the mode of goodness while going through tribulations in life?
Yes, Maharaj.
That's your question?
Yes, Maharaj.
Cultivation and shelter. One may be by conditioning, influenced by this or that or the other combination of modes, but one can move from the modes of nature that one is influenced by cultivation of those qualities. And, we learn what those qualities are and try to live by those qualities. But even more importantly, along with that, but even more importantly, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, is hearing the Bhagavatam on a regular basis. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Hearing the Bhagavatam and serving the person Bhagavat. Hearing the book Bhagavat. So by that, the lower modes are reduced or eliminated, and the mode of goodness springs up, according to the Bhagavatam. A regular hearing and service to the person and the book Bhagavat, and consciously cultivating those qualities. It's good to have role models, person from scripture or real life or whatever, that you look up to and you pray to and you aspire to learn from and become like by association. So those are three methods.
The other question that I had asked on reversals.
Reversal?
Yes. How do we learn from the reversals when we are in those tribulations?
Well, you have to be fixed. I mean, reversals are, as was discussed, it's the nature of this world. There's duality. And sometimes we're moving this way and wait a while and something happens, we're not moving this way anymore, we're moving that way. So you accept it because that's what the world is that we live in, but you don't take shelter in the configuration of duality at the moment. You take shelter in transcendence. And if one doesn't take shelter in transcendence, one is going to be moved by duality, the reversals. And sometimes. The reversal is going to change and become a different reversal, and just wait a while and it becomes a different. And it goes on and on endlessly. The recommendation is you tolerate it, accept it and tolerate it. Make some practical arrangements, whatever is appropriate, but don't become so absorbed in the practical arrangements that you forget transcendence. The mission of life is transcendence. The mission of life is to end the experience of duality and reversals and everything. That's the opportunity of human life. So don't let that slip through while attending to the reversal. Doesn't mean you go to sleep or become complacent, but that's not your absorption. Your absorption is transcendence. And then you'll have better intelligence how to deal with the particulars of any given situation.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
There she is, the clear speaker. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So
I'm going to remind you to speak directly into the microphone, please. Thank you.
So when Jitayu was going to Sita and trying to save her,
Yes.
he got killed in the process, right? So why couldn't Sita told him to go tell Ram, but even though Jitayu didn't want to,
Even though Jitayu what?
didn't want to. He could have
He didn't want what?
to leave Sita there and go tell Ram.
Yes, that's right.
He didn't want to,
That's right.
but he could have like battled a little bit, and then he could have go told Ram, right?
Yeah, we discussed this question. He had a choice: do what Sita said, or rescue her. So you want to know, why didn't he do what Sita said? Because he's very loyal to Sita, and Sita said. So why didn't he do what Sita said? That's your question, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, he was dedicated to protecting Sita. So she said, find Ram, because Ram is Sita's protector. But we mentioned 3 times. If he had gone to find Ram, Sita's gone anyways. By the time he finds Ram and Ram comes, she's gone. So he didn't want that to happen. He didn't follow because he didn't want that to happen. He made a choice. We all make choices.
And another question, when Jitayu and Sampati were going to meet Aruna, right? Or their father, trying to go higher to the sun.
Yes.
Wasn't the son supposed to understand that they want to see their father or something like that?
No, they were just having fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I have 2 questions. One, how I think understanding the life of Bharata, he's being like, people are questioning his credibility every time. There are 4 people who questioned his credibility. So how can when we are in that, not in the position, when we are seeing the same kind of a pattern, how can we make progress?
2 things. I addressed it, but I don't mind addressing it again and again. Your true character will have to be strong. Second is stand by the truth. That's the lesson. He spoke the truth, and because he was perfectly sincere and pure, his speaking the truth was compelling. It was persuasive. He wasn't part of a conspiracy. It was his character came out, and he just abided by the truth. That's what we should do. That's what Krishna did when he was also accused of something that he didn't do. Twice. Shamataka Jewel. Stood by the truth. Very simple. Next, second question.
So the second question is about the service mode. When we understand Hanuman and Jitayu, they have high level of service mode. And personally, I'm not at any lowest level of it. So now that bar is way up on it. I am way low on it. But for developing that mode, what should be the...
This is the how-to question again. So same how to answer. There are exalted persons, it's the same question. Can you remember how those same questions were answered before?
Yes.
You have, we're here, there's the goal, and we're not at the goal. So how do you get to the goal? It's a how-to. We follow, we cultivate that quality. We strengthen our other qualities that do exist, and we cultivate that quality. Following the example of ideal persons who have that quality, remember those persons, glorify those persons, pray to those persons, And you, by that method, you associate with those persons, so those qualities become your qualities. So effort and mercy with absorption in, although you're not there of that capacity that these other exemplary souls are, you're looking up to them and calling for their mercy. Girls, shh, 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 shh. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So I was wondering, when Sampati's wings got torched and he fell into the mountains,
Yeah.
why didn't Jitayu help him? Because you spoke earlier about the sibling relationship, like we may fight, but it's like a love nothing else can replace.
Yeah, we don't know. Maybe he didn't know where he went, or we don't know.
Okay.
If he knew, certainly he would go. But since he didn't go, he must not have known. That's a guess. It's not something from scripture. It's a reasonable guess because of his affection for Sampati.
Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is regarding a follow-up from yesterday evening's answer that you gave me.
Louder, please.
It's a follow-up question.
Yes.
From the answer that you gave me last evening. So I was just contemplating, for oneself, when we are going through suffering, when we are taking shelter of transcendence, it's easier to bear that suffering, and then there's not much pain. But then when we see dependence, they are suffering because of our suffering, then there is pain which is experienced. So I wanted to know how we can fix our consciousness, or how to deal with the situation when you see dependents suffer because of your suffering.
Well, the spiritual conception of life is the shelter from that. So in whatever are ways in which those who are feeling your suffering and therefore they're suffering, try to awaken or revive, strengthen, nourish the spiritual conception. And my thought is going to Prabhupada's departure from this world. He knew that others were suffering because he was suffering. In his case, he was churning it because it was increasing their attachment for him. He wasn't making an effort to mitigate his suffering by not eating and not eating and not eating. And it was very clear. You don't eat, you can't, your body won't continue. You have to eat. And he wouldn't eat. Anyway, he had his purposes. So he wasn't worried about their suffering. He was worried about transcendence and strengthening their potential for transcendence by strengthening their attachment for him. Now, that's Prabhupada. My thoughts were going to Prabhupada. Grandfather Bhishma was a different situation. He was just speaking transcendental knowledge. And by hearing transcendental knowledge, they became freed from the suffering, seeing how much he was suffering. Now my thought is going to a young woman who had cancer, terminal cancer, and she was definitely in a lot of pain. And so the devotees were coming to her, feeling sorry because she was feeling pain because she was in so much pain. And what did she do? She spoke in such high position of encouraging them in Krishna consciousness, that they were just amazed and inspired rather than feeling suffering or her suffering. So those are three different examples. And I'm looking at my watch, and I think we can take one more question. Okay, so let's do online, but we're running out of time.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Santesh Prabhu asked, is it said Bharata lived in Nandigrama forest near Ayodhya until Lord Rama came back?
Did Bharata live in the Nandigram forest till Lord Rama came back?
No, he lived in a cottage. The painting shows him in a cave, an underground dwelling.
Was this in Nandigram?
Yes.
Okay. Is Bharata an incarnation of Panchajanya, the conchshell of Lord Vishnu?
There are three different, and when we speak about when we speak about Lakshmana, the answer will be, there are three different versions. Srimad Bhagavatam says different. Padma Purana says different. And two other Puranas say different. And I can't remember which are, which of the symbols of Vishnu, Bharata was a manifestation of, one of them. So that's the Padma Purana version. And everybody knows the answer to how do you get these different versions? How do you get these different versions? Different days of Brahma. They're all right in different days of Brahma. Okay.
We have a question from Snehavali Mataji. She asks, when Lord Rama saw Jitayu like bloody and wounded, there's some stories where they say that Lord Rama thought that Jitayu was the one who harmed Sita.
Yes.
Is that in Valmiki Ramayana?
I don't recall. I likely, because I've heard it so many times, they saw that not because he was bloody, they thought he might have been the one that was had attacked Sita, but they thought this may be a Rakshasa trick. Now, it may be, that they thought also that she's been after, or Jitayu has been after Sita. So they got their bow and arrows ready. And as they got closer, they saw who it was. But they had some apprehension. Maybe it was like she's saying. So her question specifically is that in Valmiki Ramayana? And I'd have to look it up. Can you look it up while we're sitting here? Valmiki Ramayana. Do you have a way to look it up? Next.
We have an appreciation from Hema Jagannath Prabhu and Prem Sarovar Radha Mataji. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for sharing the pastimes of these great personalities.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
jai. Gaur Premanandi.
Hari Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much for this, for your association, especially kids who gave 3 days full of joyous in the reflections and all the other activities in the community hall. Especially thank you to Maharaj to have this retreat. Another session is there within this temple today at 6:30 Eastern Time, soon after the Gaur Aarti conclusion to the deities here in the Sunday temple, Sunday feast time. So stay tuned, whoever is still there here in person and also online devotees, you can keep a note. If it is a delay by 5 minutes, please do have patience, okay? Another important, which I shared in the morning and yesterday. So starting tomorrow, it will be 7 p.m. Eastern time for another 4 days at least. We'll see the pace where we can, Maharaj can complete the personalities. If it extends, again, it may extend to Connecticut as well, okay?
Here's a reference from Krishna Dharma's Ramayana. And this is a response to Snehavali's question. It doesn't say that they thought he may have been the one to attack Sita. It does say they thought he may be a Rakshasa. They prepared their bow and arrows. So, but this is Krishna Dharma's version, and he doesn't always strictly follow Valmiki Ramayana. Hare Krishna.
So Hare Krishna, and whoever is heading out, please do, you can prepare your own boxes. Our boxes are also done, right? You can just pick it up and go, okay? Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.